And let's speak now to Pete Kavanagh, who's the Regional Secretary for the Unite Union in London. And then I'll talk to Danny O'Hanlon, who's a bus driver for TfL in North London. If I could just come to you, Pete, first of all, what do you make of what Sadiq Khan has said this morning?
Well, first of all, I want to say, we're talking about heartbreaking stories. We're talking about families here between these grim statistics. And of course, our condolences go out to each and every one of them. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, is obviously now taking responsibility for what's happening, quite rightly. And he's been talking about what we've done so far. We called yesterday as a union for an end to the opening of the front doors. And we need to seal off a significant area now behind the drivers. While we have a debate about protective equipment, the provision of masks and gloves, we need to make sure that people driving these buses, driving essential workers like nurses and doctors and care workers to their places of work so they can save lives, we need to make sure these workers are safe as well. On the PPE, the personal protective equipment, please let me say this. Unite is nationally calling on our government to mobilise an army of manufacturers now, manufacturers up and down the country that are idle, that have furloughed their workers, that have got the machinery and the expertise and the experience. Only the government can coordinate a national effort now. There's a lot of ministers coming on the television and talking about this being a war. Well, if we're going to use that language, let's have a call to arms for those who can save lives. Let's get the entire country behind this effort. We need PPE for all frontline workers. Of course, the nurses and the doctors must be the absolute priority. But we can see now from these statistics, which unfortunately are equal to those who've died in the National Health Service. 1.3 million workers in the NHS, 20-odd thousand bus workers in London. We've got 9 deaths. This has got to stop. We have not got time for pilots and trials. The central door loading must come in straight away. There's no time for trials. Let's get on with this now.
Very clear demands there. And few, I'm sure, could argue with the logic there, except, of course, I suppose the delivery at the moment is what's going on here. Pete, just to get a sense of outside of London, are you aware of those measures coming in elsewhere? I mean, Sadiq Khan was saying it's the most advanced it could be in London.
Yeah, I've made a call this morning to my regional secretary colleagues up and down the country, and we have got deaths elsewhere in the country. We've got 2 in the northwest and 1 in the southwest that I'm aware of. Outside of London, we still have drivers who are expected to carry cash fares. This has got to stop. Cash, if we're talking about lives here, and we cannot be talking about income generation, all cash carrying must be stopped. All cabs must be sealed up. Drivers must be safe if they're going to carry on doing what we all want them to do and what our drivers want to do. I was asked yesterday on an interview, are our members considering industrial action? I can say very clearly they're not. They want to carry people to work, but I will give this warning. If these measures are not robust enough, then unfortunately every worker, even under the UK laws, has a right to protect himself or herself. And if they don't feel safe at work, they will start to be looking at the option of removing themselves from that position.
Let's bring in Danny O'Hanlon, who's a bus driver for TfL in North London. Danny, welcome to the programme.
Hi there, thank you.
How do you feel going to work at the moment?
A little bit nervous, very apprehensive at times. But I think it's due to people when they come on, it's like we were saying earlier, when they actually enter the bus, there's no, they swipe in with their Oyster card. It's always at the front of the bus. There's no way they can do that at the rear of the bus. So there's automatic contact the minute they get on. And as regards to the screens aren't fully protected on the buses that I'm driving as well. So that makes me a little bit apprehensive and nervous as well. And even though I've got the protective gloves and the sanitizer, which my company has provided for me, which has been brilliant, and they've been brilliant, I still feel that, these are for very worrying times for me and my family.
What is your family situation?
I've decided to stay with my friend for the time being, because obviously I'm in fear that I would actually be passing the virus on to my family. So obviously it can stay on your clothes, it can stay in your hair. So you have to be conscious of that fact. And obviously, as much as I want to go and hug my 4-year-old daughter, I can't at the moment, because there's always that fear in the background that you may pass it on, even though you might not have it yourself, but it could be on your clothes.
So you're now not living with your wife and your 4-year-old little girl?
No.
I mean, that in and of itself, I'm sure, must be really difficult.
It is very, very difficult. It's hard not to be able to, see them, and it's very difficult because, I mean, at times you think, why can't I go? But you think you have to be sensible as well at the same time. But when you do get passengers on the bus, a lot of those passengers that do get on, there aren't that many at the moment, which in some cases is great for me, because obviously there's less and less contact. It's just a major concern. The problem is you were talking about like trying to for passengers to be able to get on at the rear of the bus and swipe in. We don't have that option on the buses that we've got at all. And like I said, the protective film in front of the driver's glass is not fully covered anyway. So again, I'm less protected than I would be normally, if that makes sense.
Yes,
we don't have protective masks. We do have the gloves. We do have the sanitizer. We are given sterilization equipment in order to clean the bus. But again, I think for a lot of buses out there, not just where I'm working, these buses are not cleaned properly. That's just generally speaking. That's before the virus came out. And now that now that we're in a major pandemic, they're still not being cleaned properly, in my opinion.
Pete, there's a few issues there, and I know this is not your job to make these things happen, but it's of course your job to pressure to make these things happen. If we take a couple of them, first of all, the fact that Danny's buses just don't have that capacity. I've been on a bus which does, I've been on a bus which doesn't. How quick is it to get that capacity at the back of the bus to swipe?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to commend Danny, first of all. The commitment that he's showing there is exemplary, and it's typical of our members. Listen, the issue of the Oyster card readers, it is within the capacity of the companies to relocate those. The new Route Master buses, which have got the front, central and rear doors, they have Oyster readers at the back and in the centre of the buses. They just need to get on and move those. But at the end of the day, if they haven't got the capacity to do that, income generation is far less important than saving people's lives. The issue of the screens is important as well. I say this to Danny and all the drivers. We were given a commitment late last night that every screen in London now will be given this additional Perspex covering. If that's not happening, any member who sees that should refuse to get in that bus now and demand that they have a bus that has full protection on the screens. All of our union representatives are now stood down full time, and that's important because we've got 18 privatised operators in London whose whole ethos and whose whole reason for existence is profit driven. Forget that at the moment. We need a London-wide regime that makes sure that we have fully monitored cleaning. That's by the health and safety representatives in the union, but also by Transport for London. This needs to be a proper, thorough, comprehensive regime now. We cannot allow individual operators, individual garages to be overseeing the safety of 20-odd thousand drivers.
Have you heard anything about the idea of letting people ride for free? We've got quite a few messages coming in to saying along those lines, to protect bus drivers, would it not be logical to waive bus fares for a few weeks?
Yeah, this has happened in some other countries already. It certainly should be looked at, and it should be looked at quickly, and a decision made, immediately on that issue. Can I also say, I think Danny touched on, the issue of passengers. Some passengers are still getting on the buses when they really don't need to, and I want to join, the message that everyone is putting out there. Please only use public transport if you absolutely need to. If you're doing an essential job. We still have stories from our members saying that people are getting on the bus to go for a picnic, getting on a bus because they want to go for a little tootle around London to avoid boredom. This has got to stop. Transport for London has also got to look at maximum numbers on the bus. Sadiq Khan quite rightly has expressed concern about the passengers as well as the drivers. We care about the passengers as well, but that's TfL's responsibility. Unite the Union's responsibility is to make sure that all drivers are safe, and that's why we're saying we've got no time for trials. Let's see this central boarding only immediately, and let's look at screening off a large area behind the drivers.
Another question just here. Why are the buses running anyway? 95% are running empty. A virologist that was on 5 Live said one infected person can fill a bus with the virus as it's so fine it travels like smoke, says Steve. I mean, why are we having buses at the moment, Pete, in terms of that need?
Sure. We need to be constantly looking at the demand there. There still is demand, Emma. Certainly we do unbelievably still have a spike in the rush hours where people do need to get to work. We still need to take nurses to work. We still need to take care workers to their places of work. We still need to get delivery drivers to the depots, supermarket workers to their places of work. There still is a need for public transport. There still is a need for it to be a safely run and regulated system. But yes, I like you have seen buses running around empty or virtually empty, and I think we need to be looking at where the demand is, where we need to be getting people to hospitals and places of work. It's a very difficult job, we accept that, and if it means that buses are running around empty, at least if they're cleaned properly, if the drivers are screened off comprehensively, that will mean that those drivers can carry on doing their jobs. They don't have to live in fear. They don't have to worry about not being able to go home to hug their child and and their partner. This has just got to change, and it's got to change now. We haven't got time for pilots. Let's just crack on with it.
Danny, how busy are your buses at the moment?
They're not particularly busy. I mean, the total number of passengers that I would probably get in a day would be around about between 15 and 20 in a whole day. But like yesterday, it's funny you should touch on the subject of people being on the bus. A lot of them are still very, very ignorant to the rules and the 2 metre distance rule, even though there are notices on our buses which specify to stay 2 metres apart. Like I said, I think it was the day before yesterday, I had about 7 or 8 passengers on the bus who all went to the rear of the bus, which was great, well away from me. That's brilliant. That's no problem there. But the problem was they were all sat together in the same spot. And that's really not good enough. I mean, Boris Johnson has put the message out. He said, look, try and keep a safe distance. People are not doing it. People are just, they're very ignorant to the facts, and a lot of them generally are the younger generation who are ignorant to the fact as well. So again, they should really just wake up and and try and do something about it.
Danny, when we started I was just going to say, Danny, when we started our conversation, I asked how you felt going to work at the moment. You said you felt scared. Of course, we also began our conversation listening to a clip of a mum there who's lost her son. And I just wonder for you, would there be a moment, do you think, where you wouldn't go in because enough is enough? If we don't see that rapid change with Oyster cards installed at the back of your bus and an ability for people to board in the middle and the improvement of a face mask being given to you and the screens?
I think there would be a point, most definitely. I think it's kind of worrying that the numbers are increasing rather than decreasing at the moment, with the amount of people that have got the virus in the country. And you've got to look at that and think, well, if that figure's increasing, there's going to be a higher percentage that it could well increase on the buses as well throughout. So, yeah, very nervous. There would be a point where I'd say, look, enough is enough, But again, I wouldn't be getting paid at all. So I wouldn't be able to cover the cost of bills, etc., on a daily basis, which other drivers have got that option. They've got that 80% option to take of their wage. But unfortunately, TfL is paid by the public sector, so we haven't got that option.
And
can I come in on that, Emma?
Yeah, sorry, do come in on that. And then I've got another question about personal personal side of all of this. But go on, what do you want to say?
Yeah, thank you. The issue of furloughing is something that we have been trying to get to the bottom of with Transport for London, and they were talking to the Department for Transport about this. There is the issue that companies, organisations that have public subsidy fall outside of the furloughing scheme. However, I believe that there are clauses within that would allow this, and we do need to look at that, particularly with drivers who are classified as vulnerable. We have had one terrible situation that a driver has brought to our attention. He's received a letter from the government saying that he falls in the category of being a vulnerable individual, the medical conditions that he's got. He showed it to his company and was told that, yes, of course he's free to go home, but he wouldn't be paid. Now, I was given a cast iron commitment last night by the Mayor's office that the Transport Commissioner will be instructing all of the London operators that they've got to desist from this, that they've got to, if there's a driver who falls into that vulnerable category, he or she will be paid their full sick pay or basic pay. And this is, this just shows it's an example of having a privatised transport system with operators whose main issue is profit. We've got to address this in a different way. We've got to look at society in a different way. Public transport should be for public need, not for the not for building profits for individual companies. So that's got to stop as well. Drivers have got to feel safe, particularly vulnerable drivers, and companies have got to start behaving in a better way.
I mean, we've got a question here just saying, why are we not in a situation where we're organising private transport for NHS workers, says Andy, who's texted in from Edinburgh. Again, not a question for either of you to have the answer to, but that is not where we are at the moment. Danny, I just wanted to ask you, with your wife and having to live separately from your family at the moment, I mean, how does she feel about you going to work at the moment?
Yeah, somewhat nervous as well. Again, because, basically the numbers that have been published, all the numbers we know of that's been published with the 14 transport workers. But yeah, very nervous. But at the same time, again, it's like I was saying earlier, if I haven't got that option, to being paid. But at what point, do I say, look, enough is enough? But she's quite nervous about it. My daughter, who's only 4, she will be nervous deep down, I'm sure. And yeah, I mean, it's some days you just don't know what to do with yourself. Whether you think, shall I go into work? Shall I not? Am I safer just staying put, not going? But again, what price do you put on it? I mean, if we had the protective equipment, if we had the oyster at the rear of the bus, if there were the covers for the screen on the front of the bus, all of this would help. But then again, this kind of thing should have happened prior to the virus anyway. All of these measures should have been put in place. The cleanliness of buses and everything else should be in place even before all of this happened. Yeah. And and that just isn't there.
Thank you so much for talking to us. It's a really important area that we felt really needed some attention today with those very stark statistics. That was Pete Kavanagh, who's the Regional Secretary for the Unite Union in London, and Danny O'Hanlon, who's a bus driver for TfL, for Transport for London in North London.